Last week we looked at job costing, and then this week and a bit of process costing. I'll just do a bit of recap in terms of the process costing that we touched, and then we're gonna get into the detail of process costing as a whole. And some of the things that we'll be looking at, it's the work in progress process, sorry, and equivalent units, and the quantity statement. And also number 4, sorry, I didn't include here, it's the inventory valuation methods. So doing your quantity statement according to either the first in, first out method or the weighted average. Okay, cool. So just looking at what we covered last week. Last week we spoke about process costing. These units are identical. They are produced in bulk. What's important is to see that it's a large quantity, large quantities, and they they go through a process in order for them to be produced. And we're saying that part of that process is either it's a single process or it is a consecutive process, right? Where you will see the example below, but it was mainly that, just to say that why do we use process costing, and that there are two processes. The one could be the single one. How do you calculate your cost when it's a single process? And also consecutive process, whereby there are two processes or even more involved before you get to the final product. Okay. Also looked at the recording of, you have to know your cost flows in terms of how do you treat them when they get to the GLs, general ledger. So yeah, that's process costing that we looked at. And then I put in what we looked at last week, which is this example showing a single process, to say that within a single process, there's the input part and then the output. Only one process involved. We made an example of baking a cake that you need flour, milk, and sugar. And for the purpose of this module that you guys are doing in MAC2601, they've mentioned that the assumption is that the raw material, your inputs will be at 0%, will be at the beginning of the process, not in between. So once you have your flour, milk, and sugar, it ends up getting into a process whereby you'll be whisking and you'll be using certain machines to mix your ingredients, and you'll be using the oven. So you mixing these inputs or ingredients, it's labor, right? Because conversion, it's labor plus overhead. And a part of your overhead would be you using your oven and your electricity. And at the end of the day, it's either you've got cookies or you've got cake or you've got scones, something like that. So that's your single process to produce one of those products. And these are ingredients, and there's a conversion process. Please bear with me today because there's going to be a lot of theory that we'll be covering. I'll be moving between the slides and also that mainly focusing on the study guide. There will be more theory, but I do have, as usual, the questions that we're going to look at and the activities. Okay. And the other part is that process costing, this was a consecutive one, and the example, consecutive process costing. And this is when there's different processes involved to get the final product. An example that we had was one of making coffee, grounded coffee, that it starts with the raw coffee beans where you put them into the process. And process one only involves roasting the beans. And what you get at the end of this, it's roasted beans. It's still not something that you want to sell, but you can use it for the next process, which is getting to a point where you're grounding that coffee, those beans, where your output would be the ground coffee. But still, it's not something that you will be able to sell at that point, because why? You need to fill it and seal, and then that's when you'll be able to sell it to your customer base. So This just shows process 1, 2, 3 consecutive, as I've mentioned. It's more than one process involved, and it goes through this before you get to the final product. So that was something that we looked at last week. Okay, cool. So that was the recap of some of the things that we looked at last week. It was literally just an intro of what what's this thing? Just an intro of what we looked at and what process costing is. Identical, produced in bulk, you know what I mean? And there's also this whole thing of saying it's process 1, whereby if it's only process 1, that's a single process. And if it's more than one process, that's a consecutive one. Okay. So this week we are looking at work in process. We are looking at how to calculate your equivalent units, and also how to treat your process costing according to the inventory valuation methods that you would have used, right? Cool. And also quantity statement, and how you go about it, and they break it down here, right? Equivalent units, opening, work in process. We'll look at these things. Hence I've mentioned, but then there's a part where we're not going to look at today, which is the loss part. Okay. But it will all depend on time. Cool. Sharp. So let's refer to page 237. That's inside your guide. What they're saying about work. Cool. So they're saying here that a manufacturing process continues over different periods, e.g., months or years. For example, this is what I wanted us to look at. For example, the manufacturing of wine often stretches over a number of years. You know how they will say that it has matured. The longer it is, the more they say that it has matured, and it's a good competitive product that you can put into the market. Everyone looks at the years when it comes to a wine. I'm just making an example. Other products usually have shorter processing times. However, it is possible that at the end of the specific period, some of the units in the process will not be fully completed, right? And this would be your incomplete units. To calculate the total manufacturing cost for a period is usually straightforward, okay? The calculation of the number of units manufactured is somewhat more difficult for the following reasons, and these are the reasons that they've given us. Processing of some units may have already begun before the beginning of the current period. So let me just close my window. Yes. So what they're saying here is that the processing of some units will have already begun before beginning of the current period. This is an instance with that raw coffee, the grounded coffee, that sometimes that whole roasting, I'm just maybe exaggerating, it could be part of maybe last month we were just roasting the beans, the coffee beans, and then this month we are looking at another process. So that whole time lapse creates an issue sometimes. This means that only a portion of the work still has to be done in the current or future period to fully complete this unit. So as I'm saying, that the timing factor is an issue. Some units, independent of the period in which the work on these units was started, may still be incomplete at the end of the current period, which means that some of the work will have to be done in the future. So it's that whole diagram that I've showed you, that as much as it's grounded coffee, but then process 1 could happen in June, process 2 can happen in July, the other one, if you get what I mean. So now you're carrying this whole thing of incomplete units before they become completed. Hence, it's a work in process. We cannot simply take all the cost for the current period and apply these only to fully completed units. to calculate the average cost per unit, because this will overstate the average cost per unit. The incomplete units will, to some extent, also have to be consumed. We will therefore have to look at the partially completed units. So this is just saying that, as I was mentioning, if you have a July, August, every single period you have to account for the cost of your process, regardless of the fact that it's not complete yet. But as a management accountant, you have to understand how far have you guys, how far are your costs related to that process? Because as you go, as much as you're trying to get to the final product, some things might happen where you're looking at, maybe then I need to halt the whole process and stop the production, or hey, maybe certain things can be outsourced. So every single month you need to look, and by looking at your costing, it will enable you to make the relevant decisions that will benefit your company. So let's look at the following examples. If I have a bottle completely filled with water and another is halfway with the water, this is the same as saying it will be 1.5 bottle of water, right? It's straightforward. However, when you try to look at it in the context of processing and trying to measure how far we are with our process, we'll say that the first bottle is 100% complete. So that gives you 1. But the second one, because it's halfway there, it's 50% done. So hence you get to 1.5. And that's how you must think of process costing, that it's a matter of, the other one might be done from the previous period, but in the current period, that might be a different story because it's a different process involved, different conversion cost involved. And remember, I said conversion, it's your labor and your overheads. So continuing with the slides, calculation of equivalent units for work in process. I'm just going to say WIP going forward. We account for partially completed units by converting them into a comparable number of fully completed units called equivalent units. So when someone asks you what's an equivalent unit, it's you taking a partially completed unit and converting it into a comparable number of a fully completed unit, if you get what I mean. So that's equivalent units. And as I've mentioned, raw materials are always going to be added at the beginning, and they will be 0% complete. Okay. Process costing. Before we get to prior process, I just want to make sure that I have covered this. Okay, before that, maybe let's look at this calculation, a simple calculation of your equivalent units after explaining what they are. So for example here, they say, let's assume the cost of 100 units, which are 60% complete, are equivalent to the cost of 60 units, which are 100% complete, right? And then the cost of the 40, which are 30%, are equivalent to the 12 units, which are 100% complete. That's a mouthful and can be a bit confusing. So let's look at the numbers. So if a unit costs 40 Rand per unit to manufacture, and it is 60% complete, there are 200 units that are in WIP format. The value of the WIP will be as follows. You take 200 units of the WIP and you recognize that the part of it, it's 60% complete. It's either you apply the 60% on the cost per unit or on the units themselves. So an equivalent unit is illustrated here to say that we are recognizing that as much as it's a work in process, 60% of it is it's complete. So you are portioning it, you are bringing it up to a fully completed unit, if you get what I mean. So it's looking at the stage as to how far are we from completion. What have we completed thus far? Yes, you are still work in process, but what is that? Do you have a percentage of what is completed? Okay. Okay. Let me just do this so that we don't hear those sounds. Cool. So this one, prior process. So with the prior process, in order for you to move to the next one, you need to recognize where certain things were coming from. So from this very same example that I've indicated at the beginning, maybe let me go there, this one. Your prior process would be saying that if I'm in process 2, this, I have to acknowledge that there was a prior process before the current one. Okay. And this means that, this means that you have to acknowledge that in the previous process, those I've got roasted coffee coffee beans as opposed to the raw ones, right? However, it doesn't mean that in the current process, those roasted coffees is done. No, there's a certain process that needs to be done again. We now need to ground those coffee beans. Okay, so when a unit reaches the second process, it should be 100% complete in process 1, which is those roasted coffee beans. But it will be 0 complete for process 2, because now we need to ground those coffee beans, those roasted coffee beans. So think about it that way, in terms of when we're looking at a consecutive process, process 1, before those things, the finalized, the completed goods of process 1 are taken to process 2, they need to be completed, they need to be 100%, because we need them for the second process. So let's try look at activity, 15.1. Can you guys do this for me? It's quick, straightforward, 5 minutes tops, so we can do as we always do, just read through. I just want to see that you guys get what I'm saying or what's being said or what you read. So activity 15.1 saying calculating the equivalent unit. Jumpy Juice manufactures fruit juice in a single process and makes use of process costing. The following were given. You've got an opening WIP of 70 units, and conversion-wise, they are 75% complete. Then new units are put into the production, 230,000 units, and your closing WIP is 50,000 units, and the conversion is 20% complete. Material is added at the beginning of the process, and conversion takes place throughout evenly. So now they ask you calculate equivalent units included in the opening WIP, and you must separately for material and for conversion. Then you must calculate the production work required to complete that opening WIP. And then you must calculate the unit completed and the equivalent unit included in the closing WIP. Can we try this 5 minutes tops? Or let's say, yeah, 10 minutes. Is that fine, guys? So can we try that 10 minutes? I'm giving you 10 minutes to do this activity. Quick, and then we can continue. Then you, as usual, for those who just joined the class and maybe are new, we go through an example. Rather do it in class. You go through an example. As I've read it for you, you attempt it. I give you 10 minutes as stated. In 10 minutes, once you're done, you take me through your answers. And it's not about trying to be accurate, but it's more of trying to see how you attempt questions. Anyone who would like to take us through?
Okay. With A, what I did was because the fact, well, they are specifically for the material and the conversion costs separately. So the material is included in the beginning of the process. So that is 100% of the units. So it's for material, it is 70,000 units. For the conversion, it's 75% that is completed of the unit. So then it is just basically your opening balance WIP of 70,000 times the 75%, which gives you the 52,500 units.
Perfect. So what you recognize is the principles that they taught, that materials are added at the beginning and they are 100% complete. Okay. And then it's only when you have to do the conversion part that you will have to split it and recognize that, hey, this WIP in this process might have been added at 100%, but for this process, it's 25% complete. Okay, cool. Happiness. And then B, who would like to attempt B?
I'll attempt B. With the material needed, like you just said, it's added at the beginning, so I don't think there's any conversion work that needs to be done in terms of material. And then with the conversion cost, because it's 75% complete, we'll take the difference, which is 25%, and then we times it with the 70,000 units that are complete. And then I think it gives us 17,500 units that are still needed.
Perfect. So here, thank you. The production work required to complete that, it's recognizing that it is the 15%, because 75% of it is completed, 15% still needs to be done. So I'm just moving it forward to say that the units completed and transferred to the finished goods store, it's your opening WIP plus the units put into production, which is those 230, minus the closing WIP, and that's what will be taken to the finished goods store. Okay. And then D, they asked you the equivalent units. Equivalent units is just to recognize that for material, 100%, and conversion, what percentage are we on in terms of completion? Okay. Right. Thank you for participating, guys. So I'm moving on. I'm just looking at time. Got lots to cover, but it's fine because we've got another hour to go. Hour 50. Cool. Inventory valuation methods now. So we've looked at material, we've looked at labor, we've looked at conversion methods in terms of that it's evenly done throughout. So now you can look at the specific percentage of completion, right? And we've looked at what actually goes into the finished good store, and what is it that you have to take into account if you are asked the work that still needs to be required before that specific WIP is completed. And that was a single process, so it was easy to just follow. Now we're looking at the inventory valuations. So this is when we are saying that, as we've been covering and also probably covered in accounting, there's two valuation methods. One is the weighted average, and the second one is the first in, first out. So under the weighted average, a pool of all units is created, and each of these units is then valued at the same average amount per unit for that specific period. We've looked at weighted average, and that is just a reminder of how do you value your inventory under this specific method. The first in, first out units, you may have different values because it depends on the production period that they're coming from. The oldest inventory is deemed to be completed first. Hence, first in, first out. So the oldest one is deemed to be completed first. And unlike with the weighted average, whereby you're using an average, with first in, first out, you've got different values related to your units. Why? Because they all depend on the period that they come from. So it's just a nice reminder. So now, when it comes to the valuation of the incomplete units, under the first in, first out method, the units completed in the current period and transferred to the finished goods are split between those that are completed from the opening WIP and those that have been started in the current month. Excuse me. So with the first in, first out, there's a split. We're looking at those that have been completed from the previous process and those have been started and completed in the current period. Under the weighted average method, there's no split. The units completed in the current period and transferred to the finished goods are not split at all between what I just mentioned above. In other words, all units that were completed in the current period are treated exactly the same, regardless of whether they've had an opening WIP or not. So they are all lumped up, right? So I hope you guys remember. Very, very, very important when it comes to the valuation of incomplete units. Under first in, first out, there's a split. Under weighted average, there's no split. Okay. So now the quantity statement, I'm going to refer to what the study guide says. But a quantity statement is a summary of your flow of physical units within this process costing system. Therefore, you would have to include information that will show what you've put into the system, what happened to them, and at what value is this. So now the typical one is like this, whereby you show what you've put into the process, the details of it, and the output. So this is just to monitor the flow of what you put in and what you put out. Then the equivalent units part comes into play, whereby you have to show it according to the raw material and the conversion cost. And remember, conversion is your labor and your overheads. And you show it according to the number of units and its percentage attached to it. So before we get into equivalence, let's go to what's in the study guide. These things build up as you go. They build up one by one, but it's easier. Make sure that you understand them. So as you see here, column 1, as I've mentioned, what would you put under column 1? It's your opening WIP. Okay. And those units that we're just entering within the process, within the current period in that process. That's what would fit under input, right? Opening WIP will be coming from the previous period being entered into a new process, but we must also not forget the fact that there are other things, other materials that you would be putting in this specific current period. Okay. Then under your details, this is whereby a description as to what's what. You'll say opening WIP. This is the incomplete units in the process at the beginning of the period put into the production. This is just to explain what's what, right? So you will read all of those so that you can have an understanding in terms of descriptions of what could be put under both inputs and output. Okay, and output is, as we all know, it's your finished product. I mean, it's what's been completed. And they're saying that you must indicate how many units have been completed and how many are still in process to be complete. So that's your closing WIP. 4. Then your equivalent, remember we're under now equivalent units, there's raw and then there's conversion. Under the equivalent units for material cost, this is split into an indicative for material for each of the quantities in your output column, okay, and the percentage. And then conversion, this is the information provided in the question, could make it necessary, what we've mentioned, it's labor and overheads. Sorry about that. So yeah, guys, so that is your quantity statement explained so that even when you are doing and using it to calculate your units, your unit cost, because all we're doing here is just to try and understand what's my cost per unit, because that's what goes to your cost of sales. So we've covered that. Let's just look at the framework of a weighted average method and quantity framework under a first in, first out. Then we'll look at equivalent units. Okay. I hope you guys are still following. Cool. So now the framework of a quantity statement based on weighted average for inventory valuation, it is as follows. And they're saying a framework, as I've mentioned, everything else, you must always know your framework, because your framework will help you to be able to identify what you will need in the question paper. So quantity statement under a weighted average, it will show you your input, and that will be your opening WIP and your put into production. And then your output, which will be your completed and transferred and your closing WIP. And then there. So it's as straightforward as that. And then, what's straightforward is that, remember, under weighted average, there's no split. Okay. And under first in, first out, there's a split. So maybe that's something that you need to be cautious about. Right, so I'm moving to the next. As I've mentioned, it's a bit of theory, guys. Please bear with me. I'm sorry. Just bear with me, but questions are coming as always. Equivalent units completed from WIP. When you are in the first in, first out method, we have to split it, as I've mentioned. Units completed from the opening and units that were put into the production and completed in the current period. Therefore, we separate the units that were completed and transferred when production started. So that's all we're trying to do. We're splitting prior period and current period. That's a summary of equivalent units under first in, first out. And you need to show the percentages of units completed from opening WIP, which is your previous period, how much work still needs to be done. That's what you need to show. You need to calculate how much work still needs to be done on the opening WIP in the current period. I hope that makes sense. It's very, very important that you know that. Okay. And then you'll see the rules. The rules are inside your study guide. Know them by heart. And when first in, first out method is used, we usually have a balancing figure on our quantity statement for the number of units completed for current period. These units should always be included in the equivalent units column at 100% because they have been fully completed. We will see more examples that illustrate that. And when you are using a weighted average method, we will not need that thing of separating the lines, remember, because there's no difference between prior period and current period. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so we'll go to activity 15.2. And then when it comes to the closing WIP, the method of inventory valuation does not influence the equivalent units of your closing WIP. It only affects your opening WIP. These equivalent units are arrived at by simply multiplying the percentage of completion of your closing WIP by the relevant number of your output. So we will also see it when we do an example. So let's go to activity 15.2. So with the framework that we're looking at and what I just said now, let's try to see under first in, first out, you put in all your input, you put your output, and you have that completed and transferred, and you also show your closing WIP. Then you will show at what percentage are your units at, right? And then under, yes, this is the difference. So here you're showing your output and you see you've split it between previous period and current period. Well, as under weighted average, you lump them as one. That's the difference that I wanted to show you guys. So let's go to, where is 15.2? So you guys are going to do 15.2. I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes. And if it is long and you are done before the 20 minutes, please let me know. Okay. So 15.2, I'm just looking here. Yeah, we're almost done. So I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes and then we're going to do an exam question, okay? We're going to do 15.2. We're doing a question, an exam question, and then we'll do a self-assessment. Okay. So 15.2 says that, I'm hoping that it's Lunar Lotion Pty Limited. They manufacture shimmering body lotion in a single process and uses a process costing system. Raw material is added at the beginning of the process and conversion takes place evenly throughout the process. Cost and production figures for 2008 are as follows. You have your WIP at the beginning of the year or beginning of the period. Let's say it's the month because I can see they're looking at the month. So WIP, it's 5,000, 4,000 complete with regard to conversion cost. New units put into the process in the current month is 15, and units completed in the current is 18. WIP at the end of that month is 2,000. So prepare a quantity statement based on the weighted average and also based on the first in, first out method. Any volunteers to take us through the first one, which was weighted average?
Okay. The weighted average, I immediately started with a framework. Then what I did was the input units is 5,000. Then the detailed side, it's opening balance. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so basically what I did was I am trying to memorize how the quantity statement looks like. So as soon as I get asked in the exam, do a quantity statement on either one, it's a template that I stamp into my exam paper. And so the normal top headings is there. I immediately write, depending on if it is the weighted average or or the FIFO method, I immediately write input opening via opening WIP, put into production, output completed and transferred, closing WIP. So that's there already. So the input units, the opening WIP is 5,000 units.
Mm-hmm.
Put into production is 15,000 units.
Yeah.
Completed and transferred is 18,000 units.
Yes.
And closing WIP is 2,000 units. Then I know that because of the fact that it is the weighted average, I'm done basically with that, with the production units side of the table. So now I can move to the equivalent units. So then with raw material, because of the fact that that they said the material is at the beginning of the production process, it's 18,000 units, 100%. Conversion is also 18,000 units, 100%, because it's just what it is. It's the weighted average. It's 18,000 units that was completed and transferred. So that stays the same. With the closing WIP side, it is 2,000 units, 100% on the raw material.
Mm-hmm.
The conversion unit, that is then the 30%. Let me just quickly check the question again. Yes, that is correct. Yeah, because it is 30% of the units that is already completed. Well, yeah, 30% complete with regard to conversion costs. So then you say 2,000 units of your closing WIP times 30%.
Yeah.
And then you get to the 600. And then your bottom line, basically all your totals must add up. Your input must be 20, your output must be 20,000. Sorry, I'm doing your 20,000. Your raw material must be 20,000, but your conversion cost units, there's going to be the difference of what has been completed and moved and your closing inventory, yes, which is then 18,600.
Thank you. Makes sense. It's everything I'm just saying is. Any questions on the weighted average one? Okay, so Thembile, would you take us through the first in, first out one?
Okay, so the FIFO one, same thing like she said, I first draw the skeleton, and then basically the input column, everything's gonna stay the same as the weighted average method, ne? And then with the output side, the completed from, okay, so there's different, what's this heading? So the opening inventory is given to us, which is 5,000. And then, you know, sometimes I get confused with the raw material because, okay, my thinking with the opening inventory is that because we added the raw material at the beginning with the opening. So in this case, when we take it from the opening inventory, then raw material will be 0. I'm just thinking.
Okay.
And then and then we go to the conversion side, ne? And then it becomes, because they said the conversion is 40%, ne, with the opening balance. So the difference is 60%. So we say 3,000. Where did I get that from? Okay, it's a bit confusing for me. Wait, no, then I say 5,000. Yeah, 5,000 times 60%. Sorry, and then it gives me 3,000. It's just that I'm looking at my work and yeah, the numbers. Yeah. Ne? And then with the current production, because we don't know the answers, then we look for. Okay, basically, I just look for what I have. We don't have anything that tells us what the production is. So then I skipped and then I went to the completed and transferred, ne? Which is 18,000. So I took that and then I got the difference of 13,000. So I took 18 minus that opening inventory of 5,000, which gives me 13,000. And then so this is where it confuses me, because with the opening inventory, remember I said that the raw material we don't have to add, But now with the current production, are we now adding more raw material? So
We're not. We're just identifying the fact that you've got what you put in. There's your input, and you're also recognizing as part of your equivalent unit.
okay.
So the 13 is not more, but it's what's been given. Where's the 13? Sorry.
It's a carrying balance. I need to the 13. So you
Yes.
take the current production and then you minus.
Yes, the closing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So that's the 13. So it's not to say that they're adding more, but it is part of your current production. So what you're saying is that these are the raw materials that we needed in order to give us this completed and transferred units.
Oh, okay. Okay. If you explain it like that, then I understand. So we might need to input some more things to get our finished product, right?
Yes. So hence I'm saying that in that current period, they put in 15, right? But then there's that 2,000 situation going on. But you still have to say under equivalence units, you are saying that all I'm identifying is what are the raw materials that I needed in order to complete my units.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Happiness, guys. Any questions?
Not from my side.
All right. So if that's the case, we're going on to the next question. This is the October exam paper that we've been doing so far, one by one, according to the topics that we've covered. And in this question, and thanks guys for participating, I appreciate it. It makes the class alive. So it's 18 minutes. So let's go through the question. It's 15 marks. It's a processing question, process costing question. So let's go through it. It says that Simple Snacks manufactures one product in a single process and uses process costing. The following information is available for June. So you've got your work in process, whereby on the 1st of June, 20% was complete. On the 30th of June, 90% was complete. And what they've put into the production is 400,000. And what's been completed for that month, it's 420. Raw materials are added at the beginning and conversion takes place throughout. Normal loss. Okay, so now there's that normal loss situation. I hope you guys have a bit of a clue. Normal loss are estimated at 4% of the units that reach the wastage point. Cost information for June 2013 are as follows. Work in process, it was value of 1 million. And so then they also give you the conversion. Then current production cost, they give you the information. So what you've been asked is to prepare a weighted average method quantity statement, assuming the wastage point is 10%, takes place when the process is 10% complete. And you must prepare your first in, first out, assuming that wastage takes place at the end of the process. So guys, can you try this one? It's 15 minutes, so 7 times 1.2, the first question should take you 7 times 1.2, that's 8 minutes, and then 8 times 1.2, 8 times 1.2, that's 9 minutes. So 9 minutes on B and 8 minutes on A. I'm giving you guys, it's 15 minutes, or is it 18? Sorry, it's 18 minutes. Try your level best, guys. And it's starting now.
Hi, NTB. Info here.
I'm Paul.
Which question paper is that?
This is October exam. I think it was 2017 or so. Who would like to take us through A, the weighted average one?
Okay, I did the template again. So the opening WIP is 300,000. Put into production is 400,000. Completed and transferred is 420,000.
Mm-hmm.
Closing WIP is 240,000. So I really hope I did that correct. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, yeah. You see now with the losses and everything over there, that really that confuses me completely. So I have it wrong. I know I have it wrong because I have the plain normal loss as 40,000 straight. Yeah, because what I did was I took it as a balancing figure, if I can put it like that. So yeah, so that's what I did on that side. Yes. Okay, so let's just move on. Hop over my floor. So yeah, the equivalent units, the completed side, the raw material is again 420,000, 100%. Conversion cost units again 420,000, 100%. Let's move along through the normal loss incorrectness and then closing WIP. Is then the 240,000 at 10%, and then because of the fact that I stumbled over the loss, I got confused, and that is also wrong. Yeah, I didn't do that. I have my conversion cost incorrect.
Okay, but then
Thanks.
overall, how did you find the question?
It's actually fine. I was not going to a panic mode.
Yeah.
I was focusing work slowly through it, but yeah, not too slow. But yeah, just think before you write because it's a logical process.
It is, and very important. Don't panic. If you have a game plan, then it's easier for you to follow it. Because if you get into panic mode, when you see the solution, you're like, ah, but I knew that, you know? Yeah. Thank you for attempting. Another one. Who's going to do our first in, first out one? Stembile, Chauke, and Gaduka. Who would like to attempt the first in, first out one? Stembile.
I didn't I didn't attempt it at all because I was still battling with weighted average. But now that I look at the solutions, I wasn't too far off. I should have attempted. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so you used 18 minutes on an 8-minute question.
Yeah, I need to work on my time. Hey. Yeah, I also go into panic mode, like, ish, you don't know. And that question gave us some, what's this? There was some digits, that money. They said, I don't know how much it is, because I don't have it with me. But if you go back, they said, they gave us some amounts in rands. So I was like, yeah, like these amounts. So I was confused, like, are they supposed to go in somewhere?
Yeah, I'm not laughing, but
I started halfway through the way to through the FIFO method.
okay.
But then because then my timer went off, and then you said also no, you're done. And oh no, Okay.
Yeah,
I can do
yeah.
half of the FIFO method.
Okay, do tell.
Okay. Opening WIP again and putting your put into production is exactly the same. It's 300,000 and 400,000. Then with completed from your opening inventory is 300,000. Your current production is no. Is that the FIFO answers?
Yeah.
No.
Ah, wait.
I'll just get 0. That's fine. I can just draw a line through it. Because my opening inventory, I said, no, that's fine. Okay, it's 300,000. So my current production is then 120 because of the fact that my completed and transferred is 420. But I think I should have taken the normal loss and the abnormal loss into account. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, no, I think I'll leave this to you then.
Who attempted B? Is anyone in the room who attempted B? So I guess the moral of the story is that time is a factor, because as I was mentioning, first part was supposed to be 8 minutes, second part was supposed to be 9 minutes, and it seems like you guys exhausted all your energy in part A instead of B. So these are the type of questions that I would like us to, we'll continue doing exam questions where you have to do things under time pressure, because time pressure helps you to be able to, it forces you so that you know how the framework needs to look like and what's been given and what you need to work out, right? So maybe let's look at this and then we close off the class. Yes, so with the input, we do recognize that they gave us the 300, and so they gave us the 300 and they also gave us the 400, right? So that's fine. And then thereafter, we had to calculate the opening inventory. The opening inventory, they took the 300 and they multiplied it by the 96%. So let's try see where is that related to this one. Oh, let's see. Yeah, it's because of the normal loss. So they didn't take the full 300, but then they multiplied it by this, because probably it's because it passed, because the wastage is estimated to be at the end of the process. We've got to look at that next week, because I'm sure that this whole normal loss and abnormal loss, you guys are not yet comfortable with, but we'll revisit this question next week so that you guys understand it. Yes, any questions?
Saying yes, we can just go go through that next time.
Yeah, so I'll do that next week. And we'll also look at this question in detail, but just for the sake of looking at the solution. So this 96 is because of that 4% of the normal loss. And then sure. Let me just say in a meeting, I'll call you back. Cool. And then the current process is the balancing figure. What's number 2? The normal loss, they took the 700. Let's see, 700 is that 400 plus the 300. So this is the total production minus by the 240, which is the WIP, closing WIP, and they multiplied it by the 4% which we were given, and it gives you that 18.4. The normal loss is the balancing figure. Okay, and then abnormal loss, as far as I know, it's always a balancing figure, guys. So, but anyway, we'll talk. Then after that, we look at the raw material. It's the 132. It's at 100%, same as the conversion cost. But then we don't have any raw material for this. But then you look at the conversion as to how many how do we say, how many more units do we need to do in order to ensure that this opening WIP is completed? Then that's 80%. Then the normal loss is at 100, abnormal loss would be at 100, and then the WIP, you just had to take into account that 10% to say that, where's the WIP? Did they give us the closing WIP? Yes, it was 90% done, so you acknowledge that there, and then that is your quantity statement. Okay, so from this question, normal loss played a huge role. Even here, normal loss played a huge role. So I think next week, that's what we'll do. We're going to continue with process costing before we go to, yes, we need to now look at losses as to what does it entail and how does it affect our the production statement call. How does it affect our quantity statement? Okay, and how does it affect our quantity statement according to the inventory valuation method that we'll be using? So that will be next week's one. But thanks for attempting the question. But besides the normal loss and abnormal loss, even if you don't know something, maybe that's something that we could close up of. Even if you don't know something, stick to the things that you know so that you don't panic, because panicking is not good. End up forgetting things. The summary of today, you would look at this. It's in your study guide to say that it's important to know how do you treat your material under the specific inventory valuation method. Under first in, first out, there's 100, and under conversion 100%. Same with weighted average, closing WIP. But when it comes to conversion, we're always looking at the completion percentage of those closing WIP. Whereas when we're looking at the opening WIP under conversion cost, you're looking at 100% less the completion of the opening WIP. So you're remaining with the balancing percentage as to the what percentage it will take you to complete the opening WIP. Please remember this, because it's easier to forget that opening WIP under conversion, how do I treat it? It's the percentage that it takes for you to complete the opening WIP, whereas the closing WIP is the percentage of completion, the difference. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for today. Next week, we will look at the losses and how it implicates what can we expect under first in, first out weighted average and impact on the quantity statement.